Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Adrian, and today I've got a review for you of a book that I helped play test. So that's just I'm going to put that right at the start. Several months ago, I sat down with Greg Christopher, Chubby Funster, and we had an interview, and he told me, looking at the shelves behind, that he was going to be writing a Shadow Dark book for something behind me. Turned the camera off, and then we had the conversation that it was going to be Vampire the Masquerade in the Shadow Dark world. Now, Vampire the Masquerade is a role-playing system that I have loved since the 90s, from 1st edition all the way up to, I've got a kind of love for 5th edition, but it doesn't resonate with me like it does the earlier editions. And Greg nicely involved me and my group to be involved in the playtesting. And I'm really sorry that I forgot to actually review this. I've had my copies sent for several months now. It is, well, it's not quite Vampire the Masquerade in essence, because it's more heavy. It's more of a heavy lean to Shadow Dark. And I'm going to talk about that as I go through the review on the things I discovered as I was playing this. So it is still got that Shadow Dark feel in the Vampire the Masquerade type world. Now, if you haven't played Vampire the Masquerade, it's a 90s role-playing game that was very much based on intrigue, paranoia. You were playing like a secret vampire, if that makes sense. You know, they've existed for centuries alongside humans, and this does it really well because it's got this sort of apocalyptic end that's going to happen. So you're going to start in 1981, so it is earlier than the setting for Vampire the Masquerade. So if you're a person of my age, some of this will feel very familiar as you're playing through. He's actually got a table in there from the sort of technology from the sort of early 80s all the way through. It is exactly what I wanted to see, and I really hope, because I was more of a werewolf than a vampire fan, so I'm hoping to see that. But let me sort of get into the book. I will sort of take you through as I do. First of all, I'm going to show you where you can pick this up. It is available on DriveThruRPG. And here we've got the links in here, and it's available in softback, paper, hardback, and obviously if you're going to get it, always get it with the PDFs as well. I have seen comments where going, oh, I bought the hardback copy of the book, but the character sheet wasn't included. Make sure you buy everything. It does. And again, there's not actually that much difference in price. You're not adding a huge amount on. It comes in at 238 pages. And if you do pick up with the PDF copies, it does include character sheets and a couple of sort of node maps and stuff like that. So I'll show you as we go through that. But here we go. The year is 1981. The world is changing rapidly. If you've ever played things like, what was that? Grand Theft Auto Miami. That it sort of has that sort of 80s big collar sort of feel to this. But in this book, you're going to have everything you need. Character creation. You can build cities from this locations. It's got a ton of monsters, including werewolves in here. 6 different classes, 6 different sort of background or clans, ancestries kind of think of. But yeah, this is just standalone. This is everything that you're going to go and just be able to build and say it has got a finite plan. The more things you do as a vampire to bring the attention to yourself, the sort of quicker you're going to bring on that end game. But let's just take you over to the front cover. This perfectly, I think, shows exactly what the 80s is all about, alongside the sort of neon and blood. But I'll just show you the other things you get. So when you go to random locations or pre-made locations, you can do these as you roll as the games master. But what Greg has done here is he created some random ones here, and then it's going to take you through. I'll show you what all this means, because I know this is just a bunch of dots and lines. And then this is how you make the city. Again, all the rules in here. You're going to roll a few d20, flesh out a city with different neighborhoods and things. And then obviously you have got a character sheet in here, which should look fairly familiar if you have got a Shadow Dark background. If you're not, again, I will take you through when we get through the core rulebook. So let's just get into the core rulebook. You're going to get my thoughts and feelings as we go through the book. So this book has been written entirely by Chubby Funster. There's no AI, large language model. So say it's here, Greg Christopher. Playtesters, I'm just going to read me. And, well, we've got Andy, Paul, Neil, and Rob, who's my group. So my long-term friends, we've been sort of role-playing together for the last sort of like 35-something years. Then we've got Greg's playtesters here as well. Then a bunch of artwork, and it's been used. One thing he did say is obviously a lot of this, some of this is public domain images that he's then amended himself. So, you know, if you're one of those people that likes to use AI, I try not to cover AI books on this channel because it's not something I agree with. I'm always happy to sort of back physical artists, if that makes sense. But if you want public domain stuff, Greg does some really, I think he did a video on sort of how to do it as well. So, table of contents. We're going to start off with introduction. This is hyperlinked as well. It's going to take you through the city itself, vampires, how they work. We've then got about 40 pages of character creation. Then it's going to take you through gameplay, which is 30 pages. The Games Master section, very good Games Master section, actually. There's tools and hints in here and what a GM should do, as you'd imagine, because, you know, Chubby did write the wonderful Shadow Dark Games Master book. So he's sort of hints and tips on that. So this is all built into this section. We've then got all these encounters, which are sort of loads of different locations and random tables, the D100 tables to sort of build and flesh the world out of. Opponents, Bestiary, and then valuables, which is just sort of treasure tables and things like that at the back of the book. So as much as it seems like there's a lot in here, sort of half the book is building the world, characters, gameplay. The rest of the book, encounters, action, things to kill, things trying to kill you, and then the rewards for killing stuff. So it's action packed, but not quite as sort of, say in-depth is the wrong thing to say, but hopefully you'll sort of get that as we go through. So here's the introduction. So the introduction is just going to, this is very much White Wolf aspect. He's got, throughout the book, Greg has got all the little stories, little sayings and things like that. So if you are a fan of the original 90s books, then it's going to very much feel like that as you go through it. Here we are. The year is 1981. The world is changing rapidly. Digital technology has revolutionized communications, music, fashions, films, reaching new heights. That's what we found when we were playing it. It's no mobile phones. It's something we really take for granted. So you know, you really have to think about your communication as you go in. ShadowCity, I kind of get the feel when you read this and play it, it feels like it should be based in America, but realistically, you can base it wherever you want. Vampires, obviously you got your creation, you are created by blood, you are dead, but you can still die. So you can mimic a few things, you know, humans, you are going to look slightly different, paler skin, you don't breathe, but you can mimic some stuff. But one of the big driving goals is you're always going to be hungry, you're always going to have that sort of quest and thirst for blood. You don't have to feed every day, but eventually the hunger's going to take you, the frenzy is going to build within you, and you're going to have to go to hunt. So we've got some basics here. Obviously, you've got players, which is the player characters, and the Games Master. The Games Master is the person that's theoretically going to buy this book, and then they're going to run the game. A little bit about character creation, turns and actions in here. So the game works over two different types of turns. You've got hours and then rounds. Okay, so the game plays in hours, and you will just have normally sort of 12 hours in your day, because obviously once the sunlight comes up, it's very hard for vampires to sort of interact in the world. They also become tired, and there's some mechanical reasons why you wouldn't want to stay up. But once you get into combat or chase scenes and stuff, you're going to go into a round, and this should feel quite familiar to anyone. You know, rounds anywhere from like 3 to 6 seconds, and the reason I like the way the turns work is, especially when you're doing discovering hexes or discovering the city, by going in hourly rounds, you're asking everyone what they're wanting to achieve. So you still get that sort of crawl aspect on it. Movement's going to depend on how far people can move. In combat, you're looking to go near, which is around about 30 feet. But in the hours, depending on how far, it's kind of more abstract. So if you're catching buses, trains, things like that. Couple of things to be wary of: hit points and blood points. Hit points are the amount of beating you can take before you go unconscious or potentially die. Blood points are what keeps you alive. That's the sort of food inside you that keeps you going. But more importantly, it's the thing that you're going to use to utilize enact your powers. As a vampire, you're going to have special abilities called disciplines that you're going to be able to sort of use some of the blood within you to then go out and boost your strength, make yourself run faster, things along those lines. Dice mechanic, this is a D20 system for most things, but you still will need things like D4s all the way through to a D20. And there is advantage and disadvantage in here. So if something is favourable, you'll roll 2 die, pick the higher. If it's going against you, so unfavourable, that's probably a word, I think, should be, then you'd roll 2 dice and then pick the lower. The game itself has got 6 stats, slightly different to ShadowDark if you are, or even sort of Dungeons and Dragons. They are awareness, cognition, magnetism, physique, quickness, and willpower. But they should sound relatively familiar. Awareness is perception and aim. Cognition is thinking. Magnetism, power of personality. Think charisma. Your physique is sort of strength, athletic prowess. Quickness, sort of dexterity, speed and reflexes. Willpower, strength of mind. And if you want to achieve anything where there's a chance of failure, the Games Master is going to get you to normally roll a d20 and you'll have a DC, a difficulty rating. And now you're going to add your statistic, your plus or minus in that statistic, which I'll come on to, how we calculate that, to that d20, and you're going to look to beat a certain difficulty. That really is the mechanic. A couple of pages here about the player mindset. This is basically, it's a completely narrative game, but there's no actual story. The players will play in the world that the Games Master is going to build a little bit on the fly, a little bit in advance. Again, we're going to sort of show this, but the world is forever changing. The time will move on, and because obviously vampires, well, not obviously, but if you're a fan of vampires don't tend to age. They are immortal by aspect. They get the blood, they will just keep going forever. And this starts dealing with how to play a vampire, how to sort of move away from being yourself, become the character that you have created. So character creation, we've got a few things within the character. So we've got XP or level. So this is a level-based game. As you gain more experience, which we'll come on to, you increase in levels. As you go from level 1 or to level 2 to level 3, you will gain more disciplines, powers and abilities, and more hit points and things like that. Humanity, very, very important. This reflects your connection to the mortal skills. As you lose humanity, you become more bestial. And if you get to a -8, you eventually just give your character up and you can't play anymore because the beast has taken over you. There are some mechanical reasons why you'd want to keep your humanity high, and the game will sort of take you through how that works. So we've got the 6 statistics. You'll then have a name, background, what you did before becoming a vampire, the bloodline. Think ancestry or race, if that makes sense, but it's not quite like that because obviously they're all humanoid. Class is still as it sounds, so that's the type of vampire you are. Disciplines are powers. Assets, you will start with 3 of these. These are things in the world that will help you. They may be allies that know you. They may be contacts that you can find to go and gain information. It may just be resources. You had a lot of money before you started your own life. Touchstones are mortal NPCs that are sort of attached to the world. These, again, will help you keep your humanity high. Compulsion, like it sounds, something that you need to do. Equipment, things that you have. Hit points, said this is how much hardiness you can take. Blood points, how much blood that you've got in your system. Key mechanics sort of change once you go below 50% of your blood points. Feeding habits, your instincts. This is the preferred group of type of people that you'd rather feed from. It does make feeding easier. Defense is how hard it is for people to hit you. Think of other games, AC, armor class, and then things like you've got attack and damage. So this is the bonuses to hit or the additional damage you're going to get. So if you've role played before, some of this should sound fairly familiar. If you haven't, we'll take you through it once we get into the sort of combat sections and things. So level, you're going to start off at first level and you've got no experience. Humanity will go from -7 to +3. Okay, human default is 0. One of the big things, as you do things like kill humanoids or do more monstrous things, your humanity is going to start going down, okay? Also, as you gain a level, you will automatically lose 1 humanity. You can increase your humanity, but the key mechanic is basically, if you've got a positive mechanic, positive in humanity, your reactions will be easier. If you go to negative, they will be harder. But more importantly, you fight better with negative humanity, and it's a little bit harder to fight once you're in positive, because you are human. Humans invariably don't go around sort of beating each other up and stuff. So once you get to 8 or -8 in humanity, you're going to give your character up, and it's going to become an NPC villain that the players are going to probably interact with again at some stage, and the games master can just run with that and have a little bit of fun. So you've got your 6 stats here. So to create the plus or minus modifier for the stats, you're going to get 3d6, you're going to roll them, add them together, go down the line. So if you've got a 13, you know, and that just becomes awareness, and then so you got 13, so that's a +1. One thing it says here, if every stat is 13 or less, you may re-roll a new line. Okay. Random name table, shouldn't need to explain that. Just roll a d20, pick the name, or pick the name yourself. Your background is what you did before you became a vampire. And how this works mechanically is, let's say you were a driver, for argument's sake, and that basically means if you're driving a car and you're in a high-speed chase, you could ask the games master, okay, look, being as my background was in driving, I'd like to try and make this driving check at advantage because I was good at driving. Okay, so that's you. It's up to the players to work out exactly how they will work their background in. Bloodlines are, so we should say your sire is the person that created the vampire. And we've got 6 different ones, from bestial, foreign, lunatic, monster, radiant, and vagrant. Each one of them will have 2 advantages and 1 disadvantage that is permanent. So, for example, let's just pick monster. Your sire possessed unnatural, terrifying features that made them immediately unrecognizable as a vampire. So here we'll just pick monster. Your sire possessed unnatural and terrifying features that made them immediately recognizable as a vampire. So this is like your classic Nosferatu type vampire. The creatures of the night, double damage from fire and sunlight, and disappear. Once per night you may seemingly vanish, so you can technically go invisible, but you're going to be grotesque. So +1 blood point gain when feeding on animals. Advantage towards checks to intimidate or terrify. So each of them will have these sort of, say, 2 plot positive, 1 minus. The vagrant's quite interesting. So your sire was driven by wanderlust and hunger for new experiences, because they get this daywalker, so half damage from sunlight, and advantage on willpower checks to stay awake during the daytime. It's quite good. But however, disadvantage on all checks when there is persistent noise, so in nightclubs and stuff. I struggle with that. I can't talk to people in clubs. Or seasoned, roll for an additional discipline at first level. So vagrant that was one of the more popular ones that people wanted to get. So once you've got your sire, you will then get one of the 6 classes. Now, the classes are going to be, well, if you played ShadowDark or anything like that, it should feel quite familiar. So it's going to give you a list of weapons. So, for example, is it Uktark? I think that is. They're going to get brass knuckles, knives, shotguns, machine guns. So these are things that they're weapons you're proficient in. So you can roll normally. If you're not proficient, it's at disadvantage. Good thing is with this, you can learn proficiencies as time goes on. It will give you your starting blood points, how many hit points, and how many hit points extra you get some levels. You will then also have between 3 to 4 ongoing persistent abilities. Okay. And then we've got Uktark disciplines here. So at the first level, you get to roll 2d6, and you will just get one of these disciplines. Some of them you can be taken multiple times. Then every third, odd level, you will then get more disciplines. And you will randomly roll your disciplines on here. So then we've got things like the Butcher. So your murderous beast that lives in the trail of blood in the wake, and everyone fears your wrath. The expert class, this is what I played in the playtests. So this is very much into investigation, quick learners. You know, they are very good at forensic science and things like that. The luminary class, say you are dazzled in stars in your eyes for those around you. Free will is an illusion for the immortal mind. So these are very good at sort of manipulating people by mesmerizing and getting people to like you. The medium, they're very good at sort of talking to the dead and reading people's minds. And then finally, we got the shadow class, which, as it sounds, they can shapeshift and manipulate shadows to sort of hide and maneuver in the dark. Assets, say, all characters are going to get 3 different assets, and you will make a willpower check to see if they help you. So refuge, so you've got a hidden location that you could go and hide in the day. You've got some allies, people that, friends, family, contacts, herd, people that you can feed from, resources, additional income. Now, if you make that willpower check because you want to help them and it doesn't work because you fail, what you can technically do is burn that asset, which kind of destroys it, and then you can still succeed in that check. So touchstones are mortal NPCs to your vampire that you basically feel responsible to defend or interact with. You're going to roll a d12 3 times, and then you might end up with, say, let's say, for survivor, a relative of someone that you have murdered, so someone that you feel that you need to protect. And by doing that in-game, you will gain additional experience, but more importantly, it will help keep your humanity in check. And then Finally, you get compulsions, and these are things that you feel compelled to do so. And if your blood points become, well, once you go under half your blood points, if you're doing something against your compulsion, then you will be doing anything at that at disadvantage. So for example, cruelty, you are driven to cause pain and suffering in others. So if you spend too much blood points, or you've had, you know, it taken from you, you're then going to start becoming cruel. The only one at the bottom here is hunger. So there's an additional one at the bottom is hunger. So once you get down to only 1 blood point, the hunger compulsion kicks in, and all you want to do is feed. So if you're doing anything else other than feeding, you've got disadvantage on all other actions. Equipment just works in any of the games. So you will buy, you've got a certain amount of money, so you've got 2d6 times $10 to then put towards equipment. You can buy a backpack and things, because everyone has 3 slots. If you buy a backpack, it's going to give you an additional 7 slots. Quick reminder here, some items are illegal to possess, such as flamethrowers, grenades, and narcotics. Obviously, you know, whatever city you're going to run around, you need to sort of think about the impact of taking things with you. But yeah, these, you know, we've got all the different stats here for weapons: brass knuckles, grenades, Molotov cocktails, full description in here. Different types of ammunition you can take, crossbow bolts, handguns, different types of armor as well. A couple of bits here on hit points, so flesh and blood. So I'd say all the characters have a certain amount of hit points. Once you go down to 0 hit points, as long as you've got a blood point or more, you don't die. You're a vampire. However, if you do lose all of your blood points and all your health, you will have what's called the final death, okay? But if you lose all your hit points and you've still got some blood points, you technically go into torpor, which is like a trance. But the good news is you can use your blood points to heal. So once per turn, you can spend 1 blood point to roll a d6 and get a d6 hit points back. How do you get blood points back? Here we've got the section here on feeding, okay? And if you exceed the amount of blood that you can that you can take within your character, you can boost you can do a blood boost. And this allows you to pick one of your stats and you increase it by +2. For the whole of that, well, it's for the whole of that day. Now, how much blood can you get from a creature that you hunt? Depending on the type of creature will determine how much blood that it's got within its body. Obviously, if you completely drain it, you're going to kill it. So like a small mammal, 1 blood point. Dregs of society, a d4. So the games master is going to roll, or you could get the player to roll to determine how much blood's in there. I like the games master roll in this one because I don't want them to know. And then you can kind of see how much blood they drain, because, you know, you've got to be careful how you're feeding. Frenzy is that issue when, you know, if you ever reduce to 0 blood points, or you get a natural 1 and you're under half blood points, you must make a will check to avoid frenzy. The DC is 10 minus your level. Once you're in a frenzy, you feel compelled to basically feed on the nearest mortal until you can get up to max blood points, or they die, whichever comes first. Obviously, the problem of things like this is you're going to create violations. Violations we will come on to in a little bit. It's going to cost the players money, and it's going to head towards the end game. And if you go into a frenzy with a hunger compulsion, because remember, down to 1 blood point or less, you must make a derangement check. So these are permanent or semi-permanent things that are going to happen to the characters. Okay, there's no modifier on this roll, and it's just I'm not going to explain it. Okay, the key point of every day pretty much will be hunting, because vampires need to feed. As you're burning blood points or you're taking damage, you're going to be spending blood points. So at some stage, you're going to want to hunt. You don't need to do it every day. We tended to as players, because ideally the more blood you've got, the less chance you've got of frenzying. Now, you will have feeding habits. So you roll d12, and this will give you the preferred feeding group of the players. Now, if you're feeding on a thief, you play it safe by stealing blood bags from the medical services. You will always get advantage on your feeding check if you're going for the preferred group. If not, you are just rolling a standard dice roll, okay? The longer you spend feeding, the easier it becomes. So the DC is 10, but the more hours you get, you're going to get +1 for every hour spent before you make that feeding roll, okay? So it's really up to you as the players on how it works. Here we've got the leveling up. So you get experience as time goes on. You get experience for finding items and things like that, as well as doing stuff in the adventure. But it tends to be mainly monetary is going to be the big thing. But this is what I'm saying about gaining proficiencies. So you can spend 5 XP at any time to gain proficiency with a weapon that you don't know. You need to spend at least 2d4 hours training with that weapon. And there's little things like, you're going to get additional XP from, requiring valuables, relics, interacting with the touchstones. If you want to create a random vampire, Easy little table here. So you can do your bloodline, your class, and your assets. And that's it. That's the character done. So we're now going to get into gameplay. So surviving the night. So obviously you are a vampire, you're a monster cursed with eternal life. Every night that you rise, you feel the need for hunger and mortal blood. So each character is going to take a certain amount of actions, and it just talk about character death. You are potentially, well, obviously with the apocalypse coming, but potentially characters are going to die. So we've talked about advantage and disadvantage, but this is all your dice rolling, okay? So when there's a chance of failing, you're going to roll a d20. A natural 20 on that is always going to succeed, and the players are going to get something addition. This is called a critical. A natural 1 is always going to fail, and this potentially might make a frenzy check, and this is going to be a critical fail, if that makes sense. Luck tokens. Luck tokens are ability for the players to re-roll. So if you do have a luck token and you fail a roll, you can spend your luck token, re-roll that dice roll, and you must take the new dice roll. The good thing is, if one of your player characters fail that, you can spend your luck point on their roll as well. But once it's spent, it's gone. You only ever have one. And the games master, if they're nice, will give luck tokens for doing interesting, exciting, character-driven things during the sessions. Using the stats, so there's no skills in this game. Everything is based off the stats, and we've got some examples here. So for awareness, so spotting items or picking people out in a crowd, you'd make an awareness roll, or hitting a target with a ranged weapon or grenade. Again, it goes on awareness, okay? And then it's got all the examples here for magnetism, physique, cognition, quickness, and willpower. When would the players roll? Or games master roll. So there's negative consequence or chance of failure. The action requires a skill or specific knowledge or time pressure. So if they've got 5 hours to search a book in a library, you might not make them roll. They might go, we're going to spend 5 hours of your 12-hour session. If they need to do it in an hour because they need to get to the prince, come on what the prince is later, you might make them roll. Okay, so here's the difficulty. Normal difficulty is a 12. So you take your d20, add your statistic bonus or minus, and you're looking to get a 12 or higher. If it's an easy check, you make it a 9. Extreme check, go to an 18. If two people are clashing against something, so they're racing against each other or searching, it has a clear definition here. So each character that wins with the highest roll succeeds at the check. So if it's equal to, there isn't anything. You don't re-roll it. You just basically, there's an impasse that round, and then they need to go again the following round. So time is always ticking on in this. So it's going to assume you've got 12 hours a night and then till dawn breaks. And once dawn breaks, you're going to suffer disadvantage on all tasks until you go to sleep. I say the game runs in rounds, and outside of combat, it runs in hours. And then once you find something or doing something, you may have encounters. And once you then get into a combat, you're then going to go into what's called rounds here. But they're all still called turns. Once we then get into a combat, you would then roll initiative. And you already see a d20 plus the quickness modifier. Whoever gets the highest goes first. You then just go round the table from there. Not everyone else, so depending on where you're sat will determine the initiative order. On a player's turn, the player gets to count any personal timers, so if they've got any existing disciplines, they then can move up to near and then take an action. They may take some other actions requiring dice rolling, picking locks, and then the games master describes what happens. The games master on the flip turn, it's pretty much exactly the same for them. Politics of the world. I mentioned the prince. The prince is the person that runs the city. The vampire that runs the city. What they say goes. They're in charge. Okay, they deal with the discipline, punishments, promotions, things like that. The prince will also designate an area called an Elysium. The Elysium is a safe place. It's where all vampires can go to feel safe, to talk. So if there's ever any conflict, if you're in there, so no violence, no battles or war can ever take place in here. If you want to go and fight somewhere, you can go to the Tartarus, which is normally in one of the back alleys, and then the players can go there and do whatever they need to do, horrific things, away from the eyes of humanity. And then finally, the players are going to build up a reputation. Starts with 0, so the more good things you do, the more your reputation will build. But if you do things that the humans see to show that you're a vampire or murder people, you're going to have what's called violations. Violations are, it's an in-game mechanic that is going to bring on the apocalypse. Okay, so the game starts 0 in apocalypse. Every 5 years, the apocalypse is going to go up by 1. It's never going to go back down. But the more things that you do, the more violations you show, the more humans that get to see what you've done, the quicker the apocalypse is going to come around. So if you show 25 people stuff, you're going to need to spend a lot of money to cover it up. If you leave it to the next day, this doubles. So this is where money comes in, where not necessarily do you want to spend money sort of carousing or trying to increase your character, but you're going to have to build up your base, where you live. But more importantly, every time you mess up, because you frenzy and people see you feed, you might, especially if you're doing it in the middle of a nightclub or a football stadium or anything like that, you could be in front of thousands of people, and you're going to spend an awful lot of money, a lot of time to try and stop the apocalypse happening. Now, how do you start? The game basically starts, the players are in what's called a coterie, which is, it's a party. Let's keep it at that. And then you're just going to have a haven, which is your safe place where the characters live. Now, we first started when we were playing, we decided that we wanted to get a fridge, a TV, because we wanted a blood bank in there as well. So that was the first interactions that we did, was actually going off to a blood bank to the hospital to go and steal stuff. Getting a TV, forgetting 1981. TVs are ginormous. It was quite hard to steal, you know, making those sort of strength checks and stuff. And obviously trying to find a fridge. So you're building small, and it's good for the games master because you've created the city, but you can just start small and then just build out. So the city itself is going to be divided into neighborhoods, and the variety of neighborhoods will have points of interest in there. Don't panic. We'll talk about that as we get through it. And the players are going to control their own neighborhood, if that makes sense, which normally might just be one area of it. But as they grow in building reputation and discover more of the city, they will basically build not only their reputation, but they will have people working for them, gang members, things like that, that will just... Well, the long-term goal might be to actually take over the city. So let's look at city exploration. So how does this work? So each hour, you may be able to do things. So you may be able to patrol a hex. So this is the hex that you are in. So you can patrol that to sort of stop unwanted other vampires coming in or finding things that are going on, you know, dealing with rumours. You can go and scout an uncontrolled hex. This is what's saying about building the world slowly. The players and the games master build this world together. You can do petty thievery. You can go and find things to steal mundane items like a fridge or a DV. Or you can socialise at the Elysium to go and find additional rumours. There will be factions in this world that you will deal with. Factions can be human factions, they might be vampires, there might be other clans, things like that. It's a little bit of work for the games master, but there's some rules coming up on how you build factions and stuff. And then some of the areas will have sort of minor locations and things, which is a site. Okay, so a site is a minor location, and as you get into the site, this again starts coming out of the hours. You're now into normal rounds, if that makes sense. You tend to get people to roll the initiative once you get into the site to then determine, to make sure everyone's interacting. But as you're moving, you can go a certain distance from 20 to 30 feet. So it's near, you may be able to sort of move further. But you might make climbing and falling checks. There may be block movement. You might need to swim. You can use some disciplines to do things. You can also allow the players to regroup. There may be certain conditions that may impair how far the players row, but you're also going to be rolling, depending on the site, will determine how safe, risky or deadly it is. It'll make sense once we get further on, okay, trust me. Actions, so what can you do in the sites? You can move around, you can use your senses, you can sneak around, you can interact, you can attack things if you want. Little reminder here about taking damage, which remember, obviously you can take an equal amount of damage up to your hit points. If you get a 0, you've still got blood points, you're just going to enter in torpor. If you're at 0 for both, you are going to get to the final death. If you take a mortal down to 0 hit points, they will die. But if you put 1 blood point into them, you can turn them into a vampire. You become and they'll become a sire. They'll become a thrall. The prince might hunt you down because you technically need permission just to create vampires, but it can happen. All the rules here are for direct sunlight. You don't need a lot. Basically avoid it, or you're going to take a d6 damage per round that you're in sunlight. So you're not going to last very long. All the rules here for sneaking and hiding, detecting, surprise. If you manage to surprise someone and they don't notice you, the first round, they're just not going to interact with it. Same with the players. If the players are surprised, they're going to miss out. So initiative in combat works exactly the same. You're going to roll d20, quickness modifier, whoever goes first, then just go round clockwise from there. On your turn, you can move up to near and do a combat action, which may be a melee attack, feeding, Improvise attack, so, you know, unlock doors, throw a relic, things like that, grenades. Ranged attack, reload your weapons. Automatic fire, suppressive effect to try and sort of shoot into an area to give them, just so they, you know, so that they don't poke their heads up. Set up a heavy weapon, get that grenade launcher ready, or obviously use one of your disciplines. When you make an attack roll, depending on what you're attacking with, depending on which stat, whether it's, you know, a ranged or melee attack, you're going to roll a d20 against their defense. If you equal to or beat their defense, you're going to do damage. And then the item you're attacking with, be it a sword, grenade launcher, Molotov cocktail, will tell you how much damage they're going to take. As creatures take damage, they may make morale checks. So if they're reduced to half of their numbers, or half hit points if it's a single creature, they're going to make a willpower check, DC 15, roll under that, they're just going to run away. Okay, so not every combat goes to death. Little pursuit rules here. Quite like this, because some games don't deal with pursuits very well. It just talks about positioning the rounds, and you're going to basically be making maneuver checks, and if you succeed, both succeed, the distance stays the same, and then you might close or pull to actually escape. So that's quite good in here. Grinding, carousing for you Shadow Dark fans out there. But this is a way that you're going to take a 3-month out. You're going to be working on yourselves and the area that you work in. And you're going to spend an amount of money. So if you've got 25,000, that's going to give you +3 to this roll. You're going to roll a D4. And then this will tell you how much experience you're going to get and certain things that are going to change in the domain. Problem is, you've got to think about this. If you've managed to get 4 or 5 hexes around in your neighborhood, and then you just basically go undercover, like when Batman got locked in that prison thing, the whole world moves on. So it's going to be a realistic world that is going to keep moving on. Players might end up losing some of their hexes. We've then got 4 pages of examples of play. Read this, really, really helpful. We're then going to get to page 90, which is the, as you can see here, it's the Games Master section. This is just going to take you through initial hints and tips on things to do, and say, Greg, because he writes from a really wonderful Games Master perspective, this is going to talk you through, you know, about player exposure, you know, teaming up hordes of mortals, be competent in what you do, action economy, make sure all the players get a turn, be it in the exploration and in combat. You know, make successes mean something. Don't move the goalpost. You know, don't be cheating to make you win as the Games Master. Make sure the players have choice. Give them options. You know, it's the player's job to come up with ideas. It's your job to give the rumours and things, but let them decide where they want to go. There's, you know, it's that lack of railroading, if that makes sense. You know, keep the players motivated, keep it all unpredictable. However, this is not a balanced game. There are going to be certain encounters that you randomly roll that you really need to foreshadow to the players to go, do you really want to go there? You know, for example, if they're going to, low levels going to encounter a pack of werewolves, which are really quite powerful, don't make them roll a sort of intellect roll or anything along those lines to find out what they know about werewolves. Foreshadow it. Just say you're fully aware this is going to be an incredible difficult combat if you interact with them and things like that, because you don't really want a party wipe from not foreshadowing stuff. But again, you know, allow the players to make whatever they want to do. So the game is going to be breaking down into 3 different sections. So we've got encounters, which is pretty much either be it the combat or that action there. Trials is a link of encounters. So for example, let's say they want to take over a hex, and there may be a variety of things to do, like take over a nightclub, remove the one vampire that's from there, move on the wraiths that are in there. So you've got 3 big things to do that might take a few days, weeks, or months of game time. And then finally, you've got the Chronicle, which is the overall journey. Okay, NPCs, one of the big things that Greg was very good at, and there's tables in here for, is creating really interesting, fleshed out PCs with backgrounds, motivations, and things. So make sure you use the tables that are going on in here. Okay, but more importantly, keep the game going. You know, keep it flowing. If the players are slowing things down, make additional checks to sort of check for random encounters and things like that. So set the tone. Obviously, you're going to set in the tone. You're going to want to have a good session 0 to talk about touchstones, get the characters to name them, interact them. But this is the big thing. Start small. You know, you've got a single neighborhood that you've got the rest of the city out. As the Games Master, you will have, you know, you'll know what's going on, but the players don't. So it gives you just time to move it, okay? But also think about the city. What kind of economical activity is taking place in the city? Is it growing? Is it stagnating? You know, is the city starting to fall apart? What architecture? What sort of, you know, skyscrapers and stuff like that? What type of supernatural creatures? This is the bit about tick-tock, so constant pressure. So, you know, do more random encounters. If the players are starting to not do much in the evening, try and, you know, make the players do some reckless actions to draw some attention to the players. The police could constantly investigate several murders for weeks in their areas and things. And then we've got an exposure table as well here. So if they do, you know, there is a violation occurs, you can have a mishap here and just sort of, you know, finding out what's going on. Random encounters. So random encounters are going to come up, and depending on whether it's a safe, unsafe, risky or deadly will determine whether you're rolling once per night, every 3 hours, 2 hours or every hour. Again, we'll show you how those come about in a second, but you'll then get to roll d6 to determine how close it is to you. So NPC behaviour is what they're up to. You know, are they alert and aware of you? Are they engaged in entertainment? And then we've got a reaction check. You know, they're not automatically hostile to you. They may be friendly or compliant. They may have some valuables on them and things. So you say it's all done in that way. We've then got awards in XP, which is how your character is going to level up. This is what's saying about, you know, if you can find a mythical item, which is a historical relic, a private jet or a yacht, so something that's worth more than $250,000, you're going to get 10 XP, which will give them a big chunk of a level. Details of, you know, touchstones here, acquisition, consumption and stuff. So just, you know, bear this in mind. Right, now we need to build your city. Name it whatever you want, but we need to build it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get one of those, the hex piece of paper that, which is this one. Okay. Automatically comes with PDF copies. You're then going to get 10 D20 and you're going to roll them. Okay. And they're going to land. And depending on what number they roll on, will determine here what type of neighborhood they are. And to create a neighborhood, you're going to draw a line around it between 6 to 8 hexes, just to sort of, and then color them in and just shade them in a different color. We then need to determine naming the neighborhoods. So each of the neighborhoods will have a name. And we've got, call them what you want, do it yourself, or Greg's got you covered, and roll 2d20 and you can have like the Lexan Green. Just makes it a little bit easier. Each neighborhood will have a d4 points of interest. Now, points of interest, we're going to roll over. So we've got all the tables in here for the different. So if you've got a harbor, you roll a d10. Let's say there was 3 of them, you'd roll that and just have 3 different types of places of interest. So the only thing I have missed out is fine-tuning the city. So we've got the city hall and the municipal government will be rolled in the highest location. Okay, so if in this example, the 1, so it's in the ethnic or enclave. Okay, right, so that's your points of interest. And then say you just put them on the map and, you know, detail them. Say it's got it here as well, so you can actually just write them in these different sections and boxes. So it's already well thought out for you. We then need to look at the Shadow City and look at how it's created and select a point of interest that's centrally located and carries the area of prestige. This is where the prince is going to reside, the person that runs the city. Then near to him, one of the most prestigious buildings is going to be the Elysium, and then something far away from him that shouldn't be necessarily open in the day is going to be the Tartarus, where you're going to have the sort of fights. So population and density will determine the danger level of each of the hexes. So what you need to do then is take the number of hexes and multiply it by the points of interest, will give you a density. And then it will just sort of take you through how you work out it's the danger levels from there. Factions, so you're going to need to build the factions and kind of name them yourself, but what it basically says is, you know, each faction should have its own set of beliefs, the goals it's trying to achieve, the markings and any sort of benefit. You will have different vampire factions, being elders, and then we've got mortal factions that could be broken down by employment, creed, lineage, criminality, so gangs and things like that. If an NPC sets a task, they're going to set tasks because, you know, either create your own adventure or do it from the fly. This will just give you the sort of action they're going to do. So escort the fairy to, and we might go a smuggling den. Okay, and then we've got sort of site locations. What's the complication over here? So an impromptu rave. So a load of humans turn up and do this. Okay, site maps. So you're going to get to the location and then you're going to have to build out the nodes. And when we played, I watched Greg do this off the cuff. It was absolutely amazing just watching him doing it. So what you're going to look at, it looks a little bit weird, but So what you're looking at is the size. Each of these nodes is basically a floor. So it could be a 3-story building, and then what we've got is the branches that come out, so that go left and right. Branches, kind of think of them as rooms, as interactions. Nodes, floors on a building, so be it a tower and stuff. You can do it horizontal, so this technically going north to, north to south could be a pier, if that makes sense. And they're just different interactions. And all you're going to do is roll a d6 to determine the size of the site, and then the danger level to how long you go. And each of these nodes is going to have a d4 branches. It sounds complicated. Once you get into it for a few times, it's nice and easy. But if you don't want to, you can say, I showed you this. You can just pre-generate all these nodes, large maps and stuff to start with. You'll then basically determine what's in each of the branch types. So you roll a d10 and then determine it might be a single vampire, a mortal mob, valuables, and then we're going to get to roll. So let's say the vampire group. So it's engaged in crime, talking to themselves, whatever it may be. So some of these, though, some of the creatures can roll. So it's like here we've got a major monster, so it might be aggressive and brash. If it's created a human, we're going to have all these mortal NPCs table here, so you're going to get the origin, where they come from or how they look, if that makes sense. NPC wealth, their age, their mood, their occupation, their qualities. You can randomly roll a vampire through bloodlines, class, assets, personalities. We've got a table of rumors to build for the players, and then we've got this tech timeline that I sort of said at the start. So it's going to start you. The new technology is going to come on in 1982 all the way up to 2025. Encounters. We have now got tables and tables of encounters, but it's a historic encounters, industrial district, memorial district, midtown, military, municipal, residential, lower, residential, middle, and upper. So this is going to just, so if you're in university district, roll D100, so you get an 11, student playing a classmate to the hand over the physics notes. It's just going to give you interesting things. We'll then get into the bestiary, and the beasts are created by the stats they're going to get is defense, how hard they are to hit, the hit points, and an idea of level, and they get exactly the same stats, so awareness, cognition, magnetism, physique, quickness, and willpower, number of attacks, and how far they move in here. So we've got things like seraphim, angels, dogs in here, demons. I'm going to stop on werewolves, like different types of fairies and mages in here. The World of Darkness, it just feels very much like we've got some mortal inquisitors. So these are the people that are fully aware that vampires and supernatural creatures exist, and they're going to use faith and holy symbols to try and take them down. We've then got some different vampire examples in here. And then finally, obviously, we're going to get the really cool werewolf that's going to tear your face off if you encounter it. And then the rest of the book is magic items and mundane items and armor, and it's divided up from levels 1 to 3, 4 to 6 yet, 7 to 9, and 10 just depends. We've got a variety of boons. Then we're going to get into the relics. Remember, all the relics are worth, well, the bigger relics are worth about 10 XP, and then that is going to bring us to the close of the amazing book. Let's just go with that. I think you could tell that being part of the playtesting was such a privilege for me. I've never playtested anything, and it was quite nice that when we're going through some of the item tables that we have created, and talking to Greg, there was things he hadn't talked about and thrown in. But what I love about this is it's Vampire the Masquerade, which is, say, one of my all-time favourite games. ShadowDark, which recent worlds has become one of my favourite games. That's my favourite game of all time at this moment in time. The reason I say that, because things can change. But you're playing this more like ShadowDark than Vampire the Masquerade. And that's the thing that kind of dawned on me when I was playing. So it was part of this bit, I was in a nightclub, and I was the very techie person and not very charming. I think I was like -3 in the charisma sort of skill. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this information. I could see a safe, so I wanted the money in the safe and things. And I was like, I'm just going to have to wait for someone. And Greg was like, you're a vampire. Play this like a vampire in ShadowDark. And I was like, okay. So I did what I did, and I didn't quite beat the guy to death. But you're a vampire. You are stronger, quicker, better than humans. And because we always played vampire from the point of view of more sort of negotiation, if that makes sense. So it is a little bit different in that aspect. If you are expecting this to be Vampire the Masquerade, meets ShadowDark, actually, there's no reason why you couldn't run it like that if you want to play it with this stream down ShadowDark rules. Now, I think I haven't really got any grumbles on this. I would have liked to have seen more classes and more sort of initial, because there's only 6 and 6, which, you know, when we had a party of 4, it does kind of feel that you want a little bit more options, but I'm sure there is more coming. But 6 and 6 is enough to get going. You know, if you think about the core rule book for ShadowDark, there's only 4, and then I think is it 8 and 4 with classes and ancestors. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But I'm just I'm one of those that I like more options. More options is always good, but the options, in fairness, are really good options. The other thing that actually I think I kind of hinted on in the review is, as a games master, don't be trying to mess around with those nodes and the sort of rolling those off the bat. Say Greg did a whole nightclub and a hospital off the bat with us completely live, and we didn't even notice that he was delaying it because all the tables are in here and it flows in perfect order. But depending on how experienced you are and how comfortable you are, it might take you a few sessions to get to do that. So I would, in between the end of the first session, just sort of say to the players, you know, where do you want to go next week? What hex are you thinking of doing? Because then you can randomly create it and deal with it. But see, if they throw you a curveball, we're going to go and find this vampire. There's tables in there to just instantly go and find the vampire. You know, randomly roll an NPC vampire, randomly roll all the characters that you're going to need. I was actually, you know, when you're a bit apprehensive where someone takes something that you've loved and go, I'm going to turn it into ShadowDark. And I trust Greg explicitly because, you know, he did it with Shadow. His Skyrim conversion is really good. His Dark Zone conversion is really good. This is just another one of those that is just straight out the bat. It's everything I want from a Vampire the Masquerade in Vampires, other than I just want a little few more characters. I love the fact the apocalypse is in there. I didn't notice it on my first run through and playthrough. It was only talking to Greg that he was like, you know, have you noticed the apocalypse mechanic? I was like, I don't know what you're on about. And it's because it stops that automatic carousing because time's going to move on, but it means everything from the player's point of view has consequence, because the more vampiric things they do, the less they feed, the more chance they're getting frenzies and derangements. They will have to really think about that apocalyptic clock ticking on. Keep the money, because when you mess up, you're going to need that money because you've got to stop the apocalypse going on. It's so good. I was so pleased to be part of the playtesting, and there's little bits I say in here that is mine, that'll always be mine, that, you know, some item that we've come up with. But I had an absolute blast. It seems very strange in play, I think, because it is a world that the players are building together, that the games master will have a little bit of control over, but there's a lot of random aspects to it. But it just means just this, you can pick it up, play vampires with the really cool light rule set. Support this book, because I want to see what Greg does from here. We've talked about whether we can get a werewolf book going, and I think there may be someone working on it, because Werewolf the Apocalypse was equally as good, if not better, than Vampire the Masquerade. But I'm going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. If you're going to buy this, please do consider using my affiliate link. I say I didn't buy my copy. You know, Greg was kind enough to send me the copy as a thank you for playtesting. But I will be back soon, and thanks again for watching. Goodbye.